Welcome. My name is Alexander, and this is Syberia II. This is a continuation of my remarks last time on the first Syberia game. You can link to that in the description.
Have you heard anything about Kate Walker?
No, sir. Nothing yet.
Kate Walker, American business lawyer, has traveled across Europe searching for the savant mechanist Hans Vorarlberg. It started off as just needing him to sign some paperwork, but she became captivated by her experiences of the wider world and Hans' story. When she finally caught up with him, she threw in her lot with Hans and joined him on the last stretch of his lifelong quest, to find the legendary island of Syberia, the last homeland of mammoths.
Ah, people like you, Miss Walker, end up never going home.
The controls are broadly the same, with a couple tweaks. When the cursor lights up to indicate a path, now an arrow appears showing the exact direction. It makes it a little easier to navigate the more open environments. There are still these cases where the cursor doesn't light up, but the landscape will scroll along and reveal a larger scene. I wandered in circles here in Romansburg for a while before realizing it went further than I could see. The dialogue system is much better. Only options that are relevant are presented, and they disappear once you've used them. I also noticed that the gestures of the characters are more customized to what they're saying.
A task that engages passion is never tiresome, Kate Walker.
The puzzles mostly remain the same, finding keys or items that will, so to speak, unlock people's cooperation. The game also flirts with combining inventory items puzzles. Typically of Syberia, the things you're putting together are mostly things that actually go together, like a match with a candle, not some kind of weird improvisation like in other adventure games. There's also the kind of puzzles where you have to deduce the function and correct order of a control panel. Myst had one or two of these. Having said that, both games each have one puzzle that is absolutely baffling to me. For Syberia I, it was the music-controlled cocktail machine. In Syberia II, it's rigging this clock. My auntie has a counterweight cuckoo clock. When I was little, I used to pester her to make it chime. This made me wish I'd paid more attention to how she was doing that. There's a couple of short puzzles where I know what the outcome is, but I honestly don't get how what you do causes it. Also, there's one puzzle combination you have to rub out this fresco to uncover, and as someone who works in curation, it makes me cringe to do this. The most marked change is in the environments. Syberia II starts out a lot like Syberia I in a strange town, one in the shadow of a frankly gorgeous monastery, but a good portion of the game is in the wilderness. The first game had traces of this, but the second one goes for it. There's a wolf in the background, this harfang, or snowy owl, is always hanging around. There's a beaver who Kate has to make sure can continue its work to get across this river. Another point for Syberia's kindness, by the way, making progress by not interfering with nature.
Now what? You got cold paws? You don't want to go outside? Look, just get in. Whoa!
I love this section near the end of the game where Kate comes upon this sort of whale graveyard. I said that Syberia I piqued my interest in Eastern European history. Syberia II makes me want to binge nature documentaries. Syberia II doesn't go as far as Amerzone, which built a whole fictional ecosystem, but Benoit Sokal's whimsy persists. Most notably the Yuki, a dog-like creature who becomes Kate's companion.
Bet you couldn't wait to get your chops around that boy, huh?
While it doesn't make up animals much otherwise, it does indulge in wildly misplacing them. The snowy owl also sounds like a great horned owl. It's like how every eagle in movies sounds like a red-tailed hawk. Things get really fantastical once you reach the Yukol village. Kate learns about the Yukols at the university lecture in Syberia I. You'll learn more in II about their relationship with mammoths and the legend of Syberia. The village is gorgeous, like a combination igloo, a pueblo, and a Paleolithic mammoth bone hut. Kate's role remains keeping on the move, whether by getting new clothes for the climate, helping Oscar the automaton engineer keep the train operational, or tending Hans's failing health. There's a funny contrast between her behavior in 1 versus moments like this in 2 that show off her character development.
Wow. I never thought I'd do this.
It was at this point that Kate really started reminding me of a non-violent Lara Croft. Syberia II tests Kate by throwing something new at her. Villains. Syberia I didn't spend much time on villains. In 2, Kate first has to get away from the deranged Patriarch of Romansburg Monastery, and then 2 petty criminals from the town, Ivan and Igor, steal the train to find the Yukol people and plunder their reserves of frozen mammoth ivory. There's also a weird subplot in the background about how Kate's old boss at the law firm, with Kate's mother on his case, sends a private detective to bring her back. It seems like they're trying to build him up as a bad guy trying to drag her down, but her mother is worried to death, or as she puts it,
Oh, I've been worried to value, Munchkin.
and as far as we know, Kate still has the contract she was supposed to get signed.
What?
As shallow and inconsiderate as they are, this doesn't really click. That said, Kate politely but firmly asks them to stop, and they don't listen.
You shouldn't worry. Honestly, I'm fine.
Kate, we've got a private dick out looking for you. Trust this guy. He can help you.
You're wasting your time, Mr. Marson.
The Patriarch and Ivan, meanwhile, are both misogynistic, and would happily wipe out the Yukols for either god or gold.
White gold, sweet lips. Mammoth ivory.
In my first video, I compared Syberia to the adventures of Tintin. Well, here comes the dark side of that comparison. Not that it ever gets quite this bad, good grief. But there are parts of the game that whimsy doesn't quite cover. For the monastery, it's just little things. Damaging the artwork, for one, and how deranged the Patriarch is.
The old patriarch is an ass!
Also, he's called the Patriarch rather than the Abbot, which would make more sense. And they use Latin, whereas this far east, I think the liturgical language is Greek. Although it is kind of funny in context. Kate complains,
I don't understand Latin.
because obviously the player might not, but Kate's a lawyer, so she actually would know some Latin. Frankly, though, I feel like Christianity's been established long enough that it can take the hit. I feel more ambivalent about the Yukols. It seems weird that Kate has passed through the French, German, and Russian-speaking worlds, and it's just the indigenous people who can only communicate in broken English.
You fall on head. You call heel head. Me, great chief.
And I cannot figure out why they're so small. They look like polar hobbits.
I've got to say, I don't understand much either.
I'm always a little leery of indigenous-coded cultures in fiction, because the line between inspiration and appropriation gets especially blurry. The healer plays into stereotypes of indigenous people having magic powers. Granted, she does come across like she's intentionally messing with Kate a little.
You know me?
Miss Kate Walker expected here for a long time.
But how do you know my name?
Toot toot. Magic ears.
Magic ears?
Miss Kate Walker talk in sleep.
Ah, really?
Kate goes on to enter what I'd politely call an altered state of consciousness to bring Hans back from the brink. Bit of fetishization of traditional beliefs here. Those issues aside, I do enjoy the glimpse of Yukol life and culture, and the idea that they've maintained cultural continuity since the Ice Age is an awesome concept. Both games acknowledge how the rest of the world mistreats and marginalizes indigenous cultures, and I like how Kate and Hans need their help, and there isn't any kind of white savior dynamic in play.
I'll never forget your help.
You come back one day, if you want.
Thank you. Thank you for everything, Great Chief.
The first game had a theme of transcending the vices of civilization in the pursuit of dreams. Syberia II feels more like having a dream.
My dreams are now your dreams.
There are a couple of weird tangents that don't go anywhere. The detective never actually catches up with Kate, and there's this phone call she gets from an ally back in Romansburg.
Miss Walker, this is Colonel Emilioff. Do you remember? From Romansburg?
Colonel Emilioff? Why sure. How did you get my number?
No matter.
Seems like that's foreshadowing something, but nope. Or maybe it's all a metaphor for death. Hans is seeking his paradise and clearly has no plans to come back. Bit like the end of The Lord of the Rings, really. Equally, there's a floaty sense of wonder and discovery that culminates in... Well, I won't spoil the last stretch of the game. It comes at a cost, but is mostly very satisfying. Except that it's quite abrupt. You solve the final puzzle, get a cutscene, and that's it. Considering that the story is really more about Kate than Hans, her story just sort of cuts off when his does. Syberia did a superb job of building up the world enough that my imagination could promptly spin off ideas of what could happen. I sort of had a headcanon of Kate coming back to this dacha in the forest and settling there for a while. I even wrote fanfiction about it. That said, the story did eventually continue with Syberia III, but that's for another time. For now, thank you for watching.